How are you, Dr. Butch Ware? Did I say your name right?
You said my name exactly right, and I'm doing great. How
How
are you?
I'm doing good. How are you doing then? So let's get it started. Can you briefly describe how the primary process work? Very briefly, and then
Yeah,
please discuss your appeal to be placed on the ballot for the 2026 gubernatorial race. So it will be like a process, how it works, and what part you're doing right now to get your name in the process.
sure. So in California, we have what they refer to colloquially as a jungle primary, and that just means that the top two candidates advance, irrespective of party. There have been some challenges to this system, legal challenges to the jungle primary, because it usually disenfranchises third parties and favors the two corporate parties. However, in this particular instance, I actually think that it creates a great opportunity for a third party candidate like myself, because the state of California leans so far to the left that there are more registered independents than there are registered Republicans, and it creates an opportunity for a true leftist candidate to emerge in one of those top two positions. The primary is on June 2nd, 2026. That is the election date, but the ballots get mailed out on May 4th. So what I've been telling people is, may the 4th be with you. We're having a Star Wars type rebel uprising, and you can start that process at the ballot box, or even you drop your ballots off as early as May 4th when they get mailed out. And then you asked about the efforts of the Democrat establishment to knock me off of the ballot. They basically invented a fake technicality. So they said that I left two fields unredacted in 130 pages of tax returns. It turned out in court that that was not true. They had the correct forms in their possession the whole time. This is just an excuse to try to knock me off the ballot, because I'm polling higher than any third party candidate has since 1934. And I'm only 5 points off the leading Democrat candidates and 8 points off the leading Republican candidates, with a very, very strong chance of actually finishing in the top two. We are contesting this effort by the Secretary of State to get me off of the ballot, but I just want to be clear, off of the ballot does not mean out of the race. We are appealing the decision that was made in the Sacramento County Court. There are multiple private citizens that are filing their own lawsuits against the Secretary of State for being disenfranchised by this nonsense. And we are preparing a federal lawsuit at present. So we are going to fight them. And even if they're able to, through all of their legal mechanisms, somehow keep us off the ballot, we already have the paperwork for a write-in candidacy. So even if they try to write me off the ballot, voters can write us right back in. And people win primaries with write-in elections all the time. So we're not backing down from the fight. We're fighting them on all fronts. Yeah.
Jungle primaries. Explain yourself. I love it, but do you mean it?
Yeah, so they call it a jungle primary because it's, kind of the law of the jungle. No, only the top two advance. And so it's not inside, for example, a Democrat primary, the way that Mamdani ran in the Democrat primary for mayor in New York. And then there was a separate Republican primary, and then those two go against each other. It's irrespective of party. It's a free-for-all. Whichever top two candidates advance, those are the ones that are on the ballot in November.
Why should voters consider supporting the Green Party and your candidacy in upcoming elections?
Universal single-payer health care, housing first, which means nobody gets seconds until everyone eats, right? That's the rule that we have when we're eating at home. It's that policy except for housing. So we can't have 14 vacant properties for every homeless person that lives in the city of San Francisco, for example. So we're going to solve the housing crisis. So it's healthcare, housing, and then human rights. Human rights means I'm protecting and defending immigrant rights and immigrant communities. I've said that as governor of the state of California, I'm not complying with any unconstitutional federal orders, which means that ICE is going to have to go through every lawyer and law enforcement officer in this state before they touch so much as a hair on the head of any California resident. Human rights means rights for the LGBTQ plus community and for the trans community, because human rights are for human beings, irrespective of your gender identity or expression or your sexual orientation. We're going to fight for those rights. So it's healthcare, housing, human rights, and then education. I'm an educator. I'm a university professor. We're running on universal pre-K and free tuition college admissions for all of the public schools in the state of California. We're also running to level the spending gap between the kid that goes to school in Stockton or Compton should have the same amount spent per pupil as the kid that goes to public school in Beverly Hills. So we want education because that's the cornerstone of economic growth in California. And then lastly, divestment. I have been a lifelong anti-Zionist, a vocal critic of the ongoing Nakba and genocide in Palestine, and so we are running for divestment from genocide, not just in Palestine, but we're running on divestment from the war machine, from Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, the military-industrial complex. We want that out of the educational system. Right now, we pay tuition, our students pay tuition, and it goes straight to weapons manufacturers that mass murder around the globe, and that has to stop. So, I mean, when I want to kind of explain to people why I do what I do, I start by explaining, reading the autobiography of Malcolm X when I was a 15-year-old. I read that book cover to cover in one night, couldn't put that book down. I ran out to my public school library. I checked out an English translation of the Quran the next day because if Islam was good enough for Malcolm, I wanted to learn more about it. I read the Quran cover to cover in translation the next night. I converted to Islam before the week was out, so that's my personal faith tradition, and it provides a lot of my kind of moral center and struggle against oppression is rooted in my faith. But it was also my kind of initiation into the Black liberation tradition. So Malcolm, I mean, even the video that you're watching, my background is Malcolm X Hall at UCSB when the students took over North Hall and renamed it after Malcolm X in 1968. So all that is just to say, I try to root everything that I do in that Black liberation tradition, and I've done that throughout my career. I was leading Pan-Africanist, radical reading group when I was 19 years old. I did a PhD in African history, Islamic history, and basically revolutionary history. And that's what I've written about in my academic work, alongside, my achievements in the academy, which included, as a first-year assistant professor at age 30, I wrote a multi-million-dollar grant and ran research programs across 4 continents, but always at the same time was doing community education, community organizing, and community activism because I wanted to stay connected to the communities that mean the most to me. So long story short, I had been doing that for a couple of decades when I was asked in 2024 to run as the vice presidential candidate for the Green Party by Dr. Jill Stein. And I initially wasn't necessarily inclined to take what I do and move it into electoral politics. But I went back to Malcolm precisely because Malcolm means so much to me personally. And Malcolm was very adamant about using electoral political tools for transformational purposes. He said a ballot is a weapon of war as effective as a bullet or even more so. So for me, translating all of these professional and community organizing activities into electoral politics has been a natural transition over these last couple of years.
The context of Malcolm X in the 60s, and why is he important today?
Brilliant question. Thank you for asking that. So Malcolm is one of the most important human rights activists of the 1960s, and he's often left out of the narrative that includes King, precisely because Malcolm, while he never advocated for any kind of violent revolutionary activity, Malcolm was a partisan of the Black self-defense tradition, and so he didn't fit into the narrative of nonviolence that often surrounded King. So Malcolm said, simple things that if you are going to be victimized by a state that will not protect you, then it's your right, your Second Amendment right, to defend your own communities. And the Black Panthers similarly operated in the spirit of Malcolm and even said that that they operated in the spirit of Malcolm is that if you live in an environment where not only will the state not protect you, but the state will actively victimize you. Now, Malcolm was never involved in any incidents that involved any kind of violent resistance, but his point was simple and straightforward. It's a moral responsibility to protect your communities. And because that doesn't fit smoothly into the nonviolent narrative that surrounds King, a lot of people don't know that Malcolm was every bit the influential civil rights leader and movement builder that King was in the 1960s. And he advocated very clearly that the United States be taken to the United Nations court and tried for genocide against Black Americans, as Paul Robeson had done in the 1940s. So Malcolm was a universalist. He was a Black Muslim, but he argued that all human beings have the same rights, and he wanted to make sure that the fruits of what America promises reached all of American people. And so a lot of people don't know very much about Malcolm now. And one of the things that I've been honored to be able to do is to tell a lot of the history of Malcolm X. And he was assassinated in 1965 in large part because he was preaching a universal message of redemption, not just for the oppressed, but also for the oppressors. Similar to King, he was telling a story that we as human beings can get past this if we stop abusing one another on basis of race or on basis of wealth. He was also a women's rights advocate. He spoke broadly about how in every country where there's progress, it's because the women are progressive and that women have done more for the advancement of the cause than most men have. So Malcolm was a universalist figure whose story has been hidden from the public precisely because he was, like Fred Hampton, for example, amongst the Black Panthers, somebody that transcended racial and ethnic divides and was able to bring communities together with his message. I think one of the biggest fictions is that this is a country that's comprised of blue states and red states, blue counties and red counties. I think that that's nonsense. 50% of American voters identify as independents. Only 25% of American voters identify as Democrats, and 25% identify as Republicans. There are no blue states or red states. That's propaganda that the mainstream media pushes. And across the board, across the ideological spectrum, people are fed up with Team Blue genocide and Team Red fascism. They're fed up with the Democrats and they're fed up with the Republicans. 63% of registered voters say that those two parties do such a, quote, poor job that we need an independent third party. That number goes to 70% when you're talking to independents. It's 53% of registered Democrats, 48% of registered Republicans. So all that is to say, everyone is ready for a choice that isn't owned by corporations and by billionaires, because both the Democrats and the Republicans are owned by the same corporations and the same billionaires. And as I often say in my campaign speeches, who funds you runs you. They are told what to do by those by that corporate donor class, and they have this fake culture war, Democrat liberals versus conservatives that they carry out in public, but it in no way affects the money. And what I'm always telling people is this isn't about a so-called left or a so-called right. It's about the top versus the bottom. Those of us that are in the working class need a political party and a political movement that represent us, and so that's what I'm trying to bring. We need thriving commerce in the state of California. And I think a lot of people misunderstand when they hear that I'm an anti-capitalist. They think that I'm opposed to business. I am not. I am an anti-capitalist who is thoroughly in favor of growing commerce. And I can just give you a simple example. So you're a small business owner. I'm also a small business owner, right? So one of the things that happens with universal single-payer healthcare, for example, this will be great for business in the state of California. Why? Because General Motors pays more for its health care than it pays for the steel in its vehicles. What's going to happen when we have universal health care in the state of California? It's going to be a magnet for business because this is a huge expense that employers now have to foot. And it rebalances between the large corporations and small businesses, because why can't I hire 4 or 5 full-time employees as a small business owner? Because I can't compete on healthcare benefits. So by attacking these monopolies and just enforcing current anti-monopoly legislation, and then also providing just something simple that is a social good like universal public health care, then we can actually create an environment that is thriving for small business, where the individual family-owned farm is competitive again against the large-scale agribusiness. I am all for flourishing business. That's also part of the reason behind education reform in the state of California, is because that free tuition public education in California used to be the driving force for California's economic development and growth. And what's happened since Ronald Reagan got rid of it, which he did, back in the 70s, is that now we have growth in California, but it's massively unequal in the way that it's distributed. California is the third largest economy in the world, behind China and Germany, but we have the highest wealth inequalities of any state in the union, and we are tied with Louisiana for the highest poverty rate. So I want California to be a place where we have lots and lots of millionaires, but I want California to be a place where we tax billionaires so that they pay their fair share and stop getting off scot-free. And I want to tax the large corporations, because we need an environment wherein small business can thrive. So it's not in decline. The empire is over. And the question is, will the American Republic survive the collapse of its empire? Right? So the economic historian Richard Wolff has noted that about 4 decades ago, 80% of the world's reserve currency was held in U.S. dollars. And that number is down to about 40% now. And this has been the pattern in the decline phase of every major empire, is that they were the money standard throughout the world, and then the world starts to sell off their reserve currency because the empire is obviously declining. So what we are witnessing is the end of American imperialism. And what I have argued is that if we would divest from all of the far-flung military adventurism around the globe, which does not benefit ordinary Americans or ordinary Californians, it goes to a tiny fraction of weapons manufacturers, frankly. And if we took those resources, which are coming out of our tax dollars, and just spent those on things that we can use, like housing, healthcare, education, then this republic may just survive the inevitable fall of its empire. But instead, what is happening is what has happened in the history of the British Empire, the French Empire, the Dutch Empire, Spanish and Portuguese before them, which is that as they started to lose control over the global economy, they doubled down with increasing military extraction efforts. And that's what we have seen with the kidnapping of the Venezuelan president. That's what we have seen with waging war in Iran. And to return to your question, that is what we have seen with the genocide in Gaza. That is what we have seen with Israel being used as this proxy force for American empire in the Middle East. But do not get it twisted. Israel is not the one calling the shots. Yes, the Mossad does have compromise on particular Congress people and likely on the U.S. president. But the reality is that Israel is serving the same function in American empire that it served in the British Empire, before that. This is Caspar Weinberger, who was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of Defense, said, Israel is America's unsinkable battleship in the Middle East. It is a landed outpost for American imperialism in the so-called Middle East, and it continues to function in that way. And we are witnessing the both Israel and the Zionist project being exposed for what it really is, and American imperialism being exposed for what it really is. I've never seen any documented instance of the Iranian government killing homosexuals, but let me just be clear. The Iranian people have the same right to self-determination that any people have. It's just that self-determination has never been delivered on the back of an F-35, right? It has never been delivered through an American military bombing campaign. And with respect to criticism of, the governments throughout the Middle East, frankly, Iran is the least of my concerns. I'm more concerned about the United Arab Emirates, which continues to fund an ongoing genocide in Sudan, and which is a direct proxy and partner of the United States. I'm concerned about the Saudi government, which is massively complicit in human rights violations from A to Z, but you never hear the U.S. government critical of Saudi human rights violations because the U.S. is the sponsor of the Saudi regime. So I don't believe that participating in American imperial propaganda against Islam is anything, frankly, more than Islamophobia. And the United States government is decidedly uninterested in the human rights of people throughout the Middle East. You don't bomb people into their human rights. Iraq and Afghanistan are not any better off with respect to their human rights record, having suffered massive genocidal violence from the U.S. government. So for me, I think American imperialism needs to withdraw, and we need to be having negotiations and bilateral negotiations with all kinds of political partners. But instead, what we have is the U.S. trying to use the pretext of human rights violations in some countries as a justification for invasion and genocidal violence, while overlooking even worse violations of human rights here in the United States and amongst their own partners in other places. As a historian, we have to call the thing what it is. It is American propaganda to try to deny the United States as an empire. The United States starts as a settler colonial, expansive imperial project on the North American mainland. It expands into Mexico. It slaughters countless indigenous peoples. It begins as an empire. It was never truly a republic. And then it goes to conquest of places like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and now the United States has 800 plus military bases around the globe. If that ain't an empire, there ain't never been such a thing as an empire. The United States is the biggest, most dangerous empire in world history, period. It makes the British Empire look tame. It makes Rome look tame. It makes all of these other empires look small by comparison.
So when kids are reading in textbooks today, in schools today, that America is a superpower, they are basically being fooled.
They're being propagandized. They're being propagandized to believe that America is something other than an empire. So the first thing I would just say is that many of the founding fathers, quote unquote, of the United States project were Christians in name only, if they were Christians at all. Many of them were Freemasons. So let's be clear about this. They were members of a Masonic order, and they were often sharply critical of the conflation of religion with state power, and that's part of the reason why they, made laws. Congress shall pass no law creating an official religion or favoring an official religion. But your overall point is correct. The dominant population was Christian, and there is a kind of Christian nationalist narrative that is embedded in the telling of the story of what the United States of America is. And specifically on the far right now, there's a lot of revival of that white Christian nationalism and an effort to make that somehow central to the American political project. It's central to America as a settler colony. It is not central to America's political institutions. America's political institutions are secular political institutions. Go ahead. You wanted to say something back.
No, I'm just gonna just clarify very quickly here. Like, I am a Christian, but I'm not a Christian nationalist. That Christian nationalism is something else there. There's something else there. What is it?
Well, so it's at the core of white supremacy as a project, right? There's a reason why the Nazis were also promoting a very particular vision of Christian nationalism. So just to be clear, that has been running as a counter development in American history, but it's not all Christians and it's not all places and times, right? Catholics weren't included in the vision of what counted as white American nationalist Christianity. That was something that was Protestants, WASPs, as we used to call them, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. So there's all kinds of incomplete, enclosure of Christianity inside the American imperial project, and there's many, many contrary voices. Dr. Martin Luther King was a Christian evangelical preacher who was preached liberation theology. Nat Turner was a Christian preacher who led a slave rebellion in 1831, and there were many, many others. So I would be the last person to say that Christianity is inherently an imperial religion. That's not the teaching of Christ that I understand as a Muslim, and my mom is a practicing Catholic and very much an anti-imperialist. Now, having said that, I do think that there is something that is, what's the word I'm looking for? Threatening or scary for some Americans when they see somebody like Zoran Mamdani, or when they saw someone like Malcolm X, or when they see someone like me, because they see us being publicly Muslim as somehow a threat to them being publicly Christian. And my whole point is that our secular political institutions are designed to protect our freedom of conscience, our freedom to believe in whatever faith we want to believe in, or to not believe in any faith at all. And so for me, who you pray with and who you lay with is up to you. That's your business, and it's government's job to protect your freedom of religion and freedom of conscience. So I'm always going to be there to protect the Christian faith communities, as well as Muslim faith communities, as well as Jewish faith communities, as well as Sikh and Hindu and other faith communities, and the rights of communities who don't believe at all, because that's actually central to the American political project rather than the settler colonial project. And just to be clear, that idea of a representative democracy wherein whatever you believe, your rights are respected, that's what I believe in fighting for. I don't believe in making America great again, because but I believe that we can make America great for the first time by getting it to live up to the promises in its foundational documents, that all human beings are created equal and endowed with our Creator with inalienable rights, and that my job as an elected official is to protect those inalienable rights, no matter what your skin color, right, or what your hair color, eye color, whatever your religious background, ethnic background. It's my job to fight for those.
Final remarks: wildfires in California, climate change, jobs for Californians, vision for the future.
This is the Green Party after all, and we need to hold polluters accountable. PG&E was responsible for 480 wildfires in a single year that ran up a total of $9 billion in damage, and Gavin Newsom just wrote it off and put it back onto the taxpayers. The Democrat administration in the state of California has not delivered on high-speed rail, and let's be clear, we are not going to a personal electric vehicle our way out of a climate crisis. There isn't enough lithium in the planet to replace all of the gas vehicles, and obviously fossil fuels aren't the way forward. We spend 37% of the petroleum that we consume just shipping petroleum to other locations. It makes no sense. It's not sustainable. So the vision for California is making California a place that works for working people, a place that is more equitable, that is cleaner, greener, and more just. The Green Party stands for people, planet, and peace over profits. We want to divest from the war machine. We want environmental sustainability. I want free clean public transportation in every single major city. I want high-speed rail to run up and down the coast, because in 2008, China started building their high-speed rail at the same time California did. They have now covered the entire country of China in high-speed rail, and we still can't get a line from Los Angeles to San Francisco. I don't believe in that. So what we have to look forward to is a clean, green future that works for working people, that gets the power out of the hands of the billionaires and the corporations, that protects the human dignity of every single Californian across the board.
Thank you.
Take care. Yep. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.